Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. We are going to be discussing, do we need organized religion? And I'm with Sheikh Abdurrahim Green. So Sheikh, this
Yeah,
topic, this came out of our topic about 2 weeks ago, in which we spoke about
yeah,
New Age spirituality, and then this sort of segued nicely into this idea that okay, do we really need rules? Are rules always problematic? And
yeah,
it seems like a bit of an obvious question for some people, at least in the Western world. Do we need organized religion? Of course not. Maybe they like disorganized religion. I'm not sure what they mean by that.
yeah.
But yeah, introduce us to this topic and why it's important to cover it.
Right. I mean, look, I'm going to give a really quick beginning. I'm going to start with a really quick answer, right? And then, inshallah, what I thought we'd do is go into it deeper, right? So, I guess the quick answer is the whole point of religion is that it's supposed to be organized, right? If it's not organized, it's really not religion, almost by definition, right? And that's where you'd come to this whole topic of spirituality. When people talk about, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, I guess at least those people understand what religion means. Religion means an organized, systemized, like process through which a person worships any particular deity, right? And the moment you remove the aspect of it being organized and having some sort of regular pattern to it, it stops being religion and it becomes something else entirely, right? So I guess, but obviously people say, oh, I don't like organized religions, right? So it doesn't make sense. That's not really fully understanding the function of religion. So I guess really the whole topic is going to be a justification of why we actually really do need religion. Or, I mean, just to answer the question, yeah, we do need organized religion. And I'd come at that. I guess there's two different angles we could come at it from actually maybe three angles. From the point of view of human society, why human beings as social beings need religion. Number two, on an individual psychological angle, we need religion. Like psychologically, there's lots of evidence as to why people who have religion, who live religious lives, are happier, their lives are more fulfilling. Similarly, by the way, even on the level of the social level, there is quite a lot of evidence. I'm talking about empirical evidence here, not just so there's also a lot of evidence that on a societal level, societies that have strong religious traditions, in other words, organized religious traditions, not just some sort of spiritual new age, I'm just spiritual, right? So I'm using the term religion here in the sense that it's supposed to be, that those societies, people just tend to be more happy. And those societies just according to numerous benchmarks, just tend to be more successful. And I think the third part, which is obviously the obvious part that that any religion would probably try and argue from, is that spiritually, from the point of view of our spirit, from the point of view of our soul, we need religion. But then we would argue not just any religion will do, right? It has to be the true religion. It has to be the right religion, which is a whole nother topic, right? Is there a true religion, right? So, which is something very interesting, because I've been spending a bit of time on Clubhouse recently, and I don't know, until 1:30 last night on a room that was talking about exactly that topic. Do you have to have do you have to believe in a religious truth? It was very, very interesting. So these are sort of, it's very interesting that as you answer one question, you sort of branch off into other discussions and questions that need to be talked about.
Yeah. And I think one thing which we can definitely take away from what's going on currently in terms of this discourse is, even people who are quite secular minded and quite scientific, they still can't get away with being dismissive of this phenomena. It just seems to be a perennial issue. It just reappears in
Yeah.
different packages. So, you know, like you rightly said, they would say, look, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Well, that's just, you know, that's just a placeholder. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
You just don't want to sound like you're old fashioned, but it's
Mm.
the same thing.
Yeah.
I also want to bring in something here which seems unrelated, but I don't think it is. You spoke earlier about religion being organized and
Yeah.
religion having rules and you know, these types of things, and how people don't like that, and they say, look, human beings are happier when we don't have rules, when we don't have these types of things. So I just want to give you a little
Mm.
something to sort of glue these ideas together. Recently, I've been looking into what some evolutionary psychologists have been saying about sexual jealousy, and how in the 60s and 70s there was this idea that, you know, everybody would have sex with each other, the jealousy would go away, you know, human beings wouldn't be so possessive of each
Yeah.
other's partners. And in fact, the opposite happened. Not only did the psychologists start to say that actually, no, jealousy will never go away, people became more conservative after the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, it goes to show that this wasn't because there was some Sharia law being applied in the Western world, that the 60s and the 70s and the experiments with the drugs and the lewd lifestyle was controlled through some government. It was sort of done at a population level by people themselves, realizing
Mm.
that actually, no, they are jealous if their partner actually is, you know, sleeping around and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted you to connect that to the rules, that even though people don't want rules, they sort of start governing themselves. Like,
Yeah. 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 I mean, yeah. I mean, I think let's go back to the I think the useful thing for everybody is to sort of go back to basics, right? And let's ask the question when we're saying, you know, do we need organized religion, right? Let's define our terms, right? So I've given the short answer, right? And there's actually quite a lot to unpackage here, right? So I'm going to start by going back to the terms. What is religion? What do we mean by religion, right? Okay, that's very interesting. This itself is a very interesting topic. So I'm gonna talk about this very briefly, and I think this is really important stuff. You know, for Muslims, where you know, for Muslims, anybody who's listening, but I think particularly for Muslims, it would also help us to understand a lot about, you know, our own practice and our own belief system and how we live our lives, whether it's really up to the mark or not. It applies to everybody, right? Now, and the religion is traditionally defined as, you know, a system of, you know, system of beliefs and practices that are centered around a deity. So this is usually what is considered to be defined as a religion, right? To be honest, I didn't look up the dictionary definition, but I'm pretty sure that is pretty much that's exactly what it is, right? So that sort of begs another question. What is a deity, right? Why do people feel compelled to worship a god? Because if we can understand these things, then we'll really begin to understand what religion actually is, right? And here's going to be my interesting point at the end of it. I will put it in advance, right? Everybody is religious. There is nobody who is not religious, right? Because if you take out the word religion, right? So let's go back and let's understand, what is a god, right? What is a deity? Obviously, traditionally, a deity may be a supreme being, like the creator of the heavens and the earth, Allah or Jehovah or Yahweh, you know, or Tangril or Vishnu, right? Or whatever, right? It might be some supreme sort of transcendent being. Maybe Tangril wasn't a supreme transcendent, he was the sky god. But anyway, that some supreme transcendent being, right? So this is obviously, you know, the creator being, the prime, you know, the prime organizer. Yeah. So obviously that's one definition of God. But obviously in, you know, pagan and polytheistic religions, there are multitudes of gods. Now, in some of these religions, they may believe that gods, these actual gods, have actual powers, right? They may believe that the god of lightning controls the lightning, and the god of wind controls the wind, and the god of fertility controls whether you're going to, there's going to be crops growing or not. So they have different gods that are controlling different aspects of the elements within the universe, right? And that by appeasing these gods, appealing to them, worshipping them, that hopefully these gods will turn things in your favor. But it all comes down to, from a psychological perspective, from a psycho-spiritual perspective, there's something that human beings want and some things that human beings need. And in order to fulfill those wants and needs, one of the routes that they will take is by appealing to these gods, because they believe that these gods are going to give them what they want and what they need, right?
Yep.
Of course, the other format could be that, and this also exists in pagan religions, contrary to the claims of even some Muslims I've heard saying some extraordinary stuff these days, that in also many pagan and polytheistic religions, these gods themselves they don't attribute to these gods that they worship actual powers.
Yeah.
Right? They believe they are intercessors and intermediaries to God, or sometimes they believe they are manifestations or forms of the supreme being, right? Of an aspect or a dimension of the supreme being, right? But they believe that by focusing on this particular manifestation, which may be portrayed in the form of an idol, again, this is the path through which they believe they are going to get what they want and what they need. So it may be either from, a multitude of deities, or it may be some port of access to the supreme deity. But let's take that logic, right? Let's take the basic definition, right? Of your God is what you think is going to give you what you want and what you need, right? Let's take it as that. And then we can understand that this can actually be extended to almost anything. You don't need to even believe in a supreme being. You don't even need to believe that the elements are controlled by, some intelligent or emotional physical entities. You can believe in purely material things, such as money, for example, or fame, or power and authority, or beauty. If you think about it, in the modern world especially, these are actually the things that people think they are their gods, because they are the things that people believe are going to give them what they want and what they need. There are many people, probably most of us, right? Even the ones who claim to be Muslim. So many of us actually in reality believe that what is really the source of happiness and success in life is having money, having a secure income, being a doctor or being an engineer, having education. These are the things that we really believe actually in reality are the sources of our happiness and success.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't imagine that this is any less a type of polytheism than worshipping Zeus, Apollo, Aphrodite, Ganesh, whoever, right? They're just as much polytheism. Because if you think about the emotional, psychological, spiritual investment that you are making in those things, that ultimately you believe that they have some sort of power, some sort of ability to give you something that in fact only the supreme being, the creator of the heavens and the earth, has.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, and this is why the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, said, woe be to the worshipper of the dinar and the dirham.
Yeah.
No one, no intelligent person, even if you've been to Stanford, right, and studied with all sorts of professors, right, no one puts a dollar bill, right, or a dinar, a dirham, thinking that this thing has some actual real powers, right? No, it's very clear The shirk here is that people believe that money itself, having money, possessing money, and therefore being able to buy things, it is in their mind that their purchasing power, that somehow they could buy things to make them happy. And the point is, that's not really any less shirk. As the scholars, the scholars who understood this matter, the spiritual masters, right? They understood that the people who are drunk, intoxicated with the dunya, with the world, with worldliness, their condition is much worse than those people who are intoxicated with alcohol. Because a person who is intoxicated with wine wakes up the next morning with a headache. Whereas the person who is intoxicated with the world, they never wake up.
Yeah.
Right. And, of course, this has levels, right? There are levels where it isn't shirk, it's just a type of misguidance, but there are levels where it actually becomes shirk, where you literally, psychologically, spiritually believe and have an attachment to it that you should only have to Allah. And this is mentioned in the Quran, right? There are some people who love others as they should only love Allah. So if you're giving love to others that you should only give to Allah, this of course is a type of shirk. Yeah.
And just
Okay. So the point being here is that if you really understand this, then you will realize that everybody has a God, because everybody believes that there is something that is going to give them what they want and what they need, right? Everyone has some belief like that. And along with it comes a worldview, right? That worldview will inevitably begin to formulate itself into a set of ritualistic practices through which and by which those people believe they will be able to approach their God. I put it in inverted commas, right? So I always give the example of, like myself, I was brought up in a, middle class English family, right? And I would say that one of the things, right, that is, and it's still, despite many attempts to make, Britain a classless society, has failed miserably. Obviously, Britain is still a strongly class divided society. So part of what the middle classes believe is that by being in the middle class, the upper middle class, the aristocracy, similarly, they believe it's a source of success in life. They believe it's a path to success. They believe that through that and by that, they will get what they want and what they need, right? They call it the old boys network, and you see it working, and it's been all over the news, right? And you've had Piers Morgan, right, grilling Hancock about it, because basically they're handing out contracts to their old Etonian public school buddies, right? And, even though they have absolutely no knowledge and experience, right, to, actually provide these services, but that's how the system works, because that's their religion. You have to understand, this is their deen. This is their religion. And they will say, we're not religious, right?
Yeah.
But they are, right?
Yeah.
And it is a religion,
You,
right?
you
Because
know,
it all comes with the package,
yeah.
right? Okay.
This
So
kind
just
of
as
reminds me.
Islam will say, innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, verily the believers are brothers, they have their equivalent, right?
They do. They
They
do.
have their equivalent of it, right? And they can talk about not dividing people, but they are extremely divisive themselves. In fact, the whole system of protocols, right, about how you talk, what you say, what words you use, how you eat, the type of car you drive, the clothes that you dress in, they are all benchmarks in order to cause separation. That's what they are all about, in order to know who is really from their class and who is not, right?
Yeah.
Because a pretender, unless they are really, really skilled and they've been very, very well tutored, right, will always get caught out. And the problem is, right, even if you're well tutored, like my mum's a classic example, right? Because she comes from a Polish background. She had to learn all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And the irony is, because she had to learn it, she's almost in it. She's like, you know, like converts are supposed to be like extra enthusiastic and extreme, right? You spot that, because someone who's really from the middle class will realize that these rules, although they are there, right, they're never taken completely seriously by those people in the know, right? And in order to fake that balance of playing the game and acting out the act, right, yet at the same time knowing when, you know, just to throw your, you know, throw your bun across the room at each other and like break all the rules, right, which is totally against the rules, but actually people realize that those rules don't really mean anything when you're in the company of those people who
Yeah.
are of the same class as you, right? So like, you know, it's hard to fake it, and it's there on purpose. It's a system of division, right? It's a system of divide and rule. Okay, so it's a religion,
Yeah.
right? It's a religion in the sense that I have described it previously. No one would think of it, and even as I'm sure as I'm saying it, people say, what are you talking about? If someone just came in right now, they say, what are you talking about? It's not a religion. Yes, of course, in the sense of how religion is traditionally defined, but that, even that's the point, right? Even here, the definition of words is corrupted by the paradigm of the society,
Yeah.
because we live in a highly secularized society, right, that has become imbued with secular thought. Even these terms like religion have taken on a meaning that is only contextualized within the is only understood within the context of that secular society. So for most people, religion means what? Like you go to church and get married, or you go to church on Friday, or you go to the church on Sunday, or you go to the synagogue on Saturday, or you go to the masjid on Friday. You know, you pray 5 times a day. You perform, you know, you go through these life rituals,
Yeah.
and that is it. That's religion, right? That's how, this is a secularized idea of religion. Even the idea that, you know, Muslims still in some way cling onto the idea that Islam is a deen, it's a way of life,
Yeah.
right? قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحيا ومماتي لله رب العالمين. Say that my, you know, say that my prayer
Life.
and my sacrifice and my life and my death is all for Allah, the Lord of the world. So the idea that Islam is all comprehensive, and it encompasses politics, and it encompasses economics, and it encompasses law, and everything is there, right? The Muslims are just sort of hanging on to this, right? It didn't used to be only Islam that had this belief, right? There's still a few Christians who believe this, by the way, about their religion,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You see it emerging in America, right? So even in America, right, they believe that Christian beliefs should impact on politics. So they have this whole thing about, you know, abortion and homosexuality, right? And there's, because that's from their belief system, right, that these things are not allowed. So they understand that you can't just relegate religious belief to some personal, you know, prayers and practices that you just keep to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you know, 500, 600, 700 years ago, Christianity was hugely influential, right? I mean, it's interesting that Oliver Cromwell, right? These guys were religious nutcases, right? I mean, the whole idea was a religious idea, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of this religion that's almost divorced from life, right, is actually a very, very new idea, right?
Yeah.
Even in Buddhism, right? The original idea of Buddhism is that, yes, people do retreat to these monasteries, you know, to get enlightenment. But the ultimate idea is to spread these
Yeah.
concepts throughout society. So even the idea and the objective is to enlighten the whole of society, not to confine it to some, you know, some
Monastery.
monasteries, right? Or even some moments of some people's lives, right? So this is a very, very modern idea of religion, right? In Islam, we have this deen, this idea of deen, the way of life. Everybody has a way of life,
Yeah.
right? Everybody worships someone or something. So the real question, therefore, is the God that you worship really worthy of it?
Yeah.
Is it really going to give you what you want and what you need, right? Or are you just deluding yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you've organized your life one way or another. You know, you may not think that you've organized it, but even the most like even a drug addict,
He has a routine.
you think the most sort of disorganized dropout person, believe me, I've been there, right? I've been there before I was Muslim. I have been there, right? Your life is very organized. It's organized around getting your next piece of drug, your next your next blow, your next snort, your next injection, whatever it is, whatever drug you're taking. Your life is very organized. When you run out, you see how organized your life is,
Oh yeah.
right? So even for these people, their life is organized around that, that thing that they have deified to some way, shape, or form, right? So the ultimate thing is, it's just a lie to say, I don't believe in organized religion. No, you have an organized religion. You just don't recognize, you don't call it religion. You just
Yeah.
don't give it that term, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, the bottom line is, you have a God, right? But unless your God is Allah, who is the creator of the heavens and the earth, who has control and mastery over everything, that God is false. That God can never ultimately deliver what you really want and what you really need, right? It is always going to fail ultimately. Actually, we as Muslims would contend that that is the very purpose of life, is to realize that fact. The very structure of the universe and everything in it is built around exposing that fact, right? That is something, bro, Sabor, as you sit as a Muslim, right? And you watch the world go by, you watch current events. Look at what's happening now,
Mm.
right? Look at what's happening right now with the coronavirus. In these countries, the irony is, in the very countries, France, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, the very places who were putting forth all these specious arguments about why women should not be able to cover their face, right, have now mandated and made it by law that you have to cover your face and will fine you. France, yeah, the French, who, if you want to see a country who's just like, it's almost as if Allah has created them to show the world how stupid secularism is. Yeah. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's like I often say about the Bible. If God wanted to produce a book that would show everybody a book that's not from him, although it may sort of look like it, the Bible's a pretty good contender for it, right? You look at the French, right? I mean, if you want an example of why secularism makes no sense, why it is self-defeating, stupid, contradictory, irrational, despite all of their claims to enlightenment and rationality, it's exactly the opposite. The world looks at them and goes, what is wrong with you people, right? And in this country, you have a law, right, that if a Muslim woman covers her face with a niqab, she gets fined, right? And if you don't wear a face mask, you get fined.
Yeah.
And all of these things they were talking about, we can't communicate with each other, right? Part of our culture is to show our face. What is
Yeah.
your society stop functioning now because now you have to cover your face? I'm telling you, literally, Allah has exposed them. This is what is going on.
Yeah.
Every Muslim who has a brain, and actually most human beings who have a brain can see it, right? But the blind can't see it, and the deaf can't hear it, right? And the dumb can't vocalize it because they are blinded, right, by their misguidance,
Yeah.
right? They are deafened by their arrogance and their pride, right? It's not the blindness of the eyes and the ears, right? It's the heart. Their hearts are blind, right? And that's just one example. I could go on and on and on. Freedom of speech. Look at the whole freedom of speech. You see what's happening now, right? With the whole, shutting down of freedom of speech when
Yeah.
it maybe comes to, Zionism and Israel, for example, right? Connecting it to anti-Semitism, right? The whole LGBT issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we can go on and on and on, right? These are the people harking on about freedom of speech. Where is the freedom of speech? They talk about human rights, right? All of these things about human rights, the freedom of the individual, right? All of these things are just going out of the window, right?
Yeah.
And this is because that is really literally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that he hurls the truth against the falsehood, and
Yeah.
see the falsehood, its brains are smashed out. And that is literally the order of the universe. That is why God has created the world that the way he has created it, to expose these things, to make these truths known. And this is what Allah says in the Quran: we will show them the signs within themselves
Yep.
and
Yep.
on the furthest horizons until they know that this is the truth, right?
Mm.
So this is one dimension, right?
Yeah.
The other dimension about why we need organized religion, bro, is this is like, I'm coming from a completely different angle now, right? Now,
Mm.
we've talked about this before. We've talked about flow, right? We've talked about optimal flow and optimal
Yeah.
experience, right? Okay. And so this is really interesting as well. So I'm coming, guys, from a whole different angle now, right? You're gonna have to think in a different paradigm. There's a lot coming out in this one little session, yeah. Because honestly, I've got so much to unpackage in this, right? So look, as we know, we've talked about previously, and people can check the previous episode where we talked about flow, we talked about optimal experience, and we talked about the conditions in order to reach these states of optimal experience, which we have talked about is true happiness,
Yeah.
right? True happiness comes from pushing yourself to the limits of your capabilities. And we've had a lot of discussion about that, right? Now, one of the interesting things that I've studied relatively recently is how do elite sportsmen and sportswomen, right? And I'm particularly, because I had two of my kids who were involved in racing,
Mm.
right? And it's very interesting because it's a particular type of racing. It's racing mountain bikes downhill, right? It's literally downhill. And the time margins, like downhill skiing, for example, right? And I'm sure there's other similar sports, right? The most of the time, not always, occasionally you get, things that break these rules, but most of the time you'll find the difference in time between the top elite men and the top, in their category, the top elite men, right? The difference in the times between, say, the top 10 elite men is not even 1 second. You're talking about a win is measured in hundredths of a second. And you are talking about people who are riding down a hill through rocks and roots and jumps and sometimes mud. And, you have to see it. And you will think, how is it that these guys are so close? They are so fast. Every single one of them is literally on the yet here's the strange thing. It often happens that there are some people, and often you find the top 10, those top 10 guys more or less stay consistent. Bar some injuries, they more or less stay consistent. You'll find many times the top 2, the top podiums, is just consistently the same people. How? How is that? This is what I'm fascinated. What makes it special about these people? And sometimes the crazy thing is you'll get someone that's so good is that for literally they will dominate the sport for 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years, right? They will barely be off a podium. But it's incredible. Honestly, the physicality of it, it's mind-blowing. So I was, I'm very curious. What makes these people different? I do not believe in talent, right? I don't believe there is a natural born ability. Yes. Now, here's the interesting thing, by the way. I want to mention something. Here's the interesting thing. Some of these guys are short, some of these guys are tall. So it's not like basketball, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know I've ridden with brothers, right? Just my normal riding buddies, right? And generally, the guys who are better are the shorter guys. And the reason is because their center of gravity is lower, right? And they're more stable on the bike. When it comes to downhill mountain biking, no, doesn't make the, one of the greatest riders, Greg Minnaar, probably the most successful downhill mountain bike rider. He's a tall guy, right? But some of the great guys are small, right? It doesn't seem to make much difference. Obviously, from everyone being fit, very, very fit, size doesn't seem to make a difference. So what's the real deciding factor, right? Geography, that from all over the world, right? So it's not like in marathons where, people are brought up with a certain diet, or Kenyans, are known to be good, probably because a lot of them run to school for miles and miles. It's not like that, right? It's like, obviously there's an advantage for Westerners, people who are rich, because mountain bikes aren't cheap, right? But that it's because this is why it's fascinating, this particular sport, right? Because it's so wide open to so many people, and it's so easy for anyone to do it. So what is the deciding factor, right? I've been fascinated by this, right? And I think it goes across many sports. I think boxing, and other sports as well, right? And I think that what happens when you come, so now we're moving away from not just flow, right? Now we're moving to, what you could call Superman territory, not Superman as in Clark Kent, right? You're talking about a whole different level, right? And on this level of sport, there has to be, I would argue, and I haven't proven this, right? But I would argue that you have to have a state of mind, right? It's to do with what's in the head. And in order for you to be successful, right, you can't have any crap, you excuse if that's not appropriate language, right? You can't have rubbish going around in your head. If I put it bluntly, you can't have existential angst, right? You can't be wondering, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here, right? Is God one or is God three, right? I mean, actually, maybe I thought about it. Maybe these questions could drive some people to perform better, but I don't think it would be long lasting, right? I think it would ultimately get in the way, right? It would ultimately stop them, right? So what I'm proposing is that people have to have clarity. And I would suggest that it's quite interesting, maybe not so much even in downhill mountain biking, right? But you'd find, isn't it interesting that many of the top people in some of the sports are actually religious, right? They're either practicing Christians, they may not be obvious, or they fight famously in martial arts, for example, they're Muslims, right? They have a lot of famous Muslims, right? Now, I would say that, look, in order to reach that peak performance, right, you can't have stuff going on off in your head that's confusing you. Now, if this is true for athletes, right, so they have to come to some worldview, right? They have to come, they figured out some answers. That's what I reckon. And all it needs is that those answers make sense to them in their head. I mean, they could be atheists, but as long as they're convinced, right, that's it. Right? They can't have dissonance going on, right? I mean, as long as it makes sense to them, that's fine. Like, from a performance perspective, it's fine, right? When it's not fine is, like when there's these problems, right? Okay, so what's all of this got to do with why do we need organized religion, right? Because obviously sport, as I brought this up before, right? When you're an athlete, your life is very organized, by the way. Your life is very, very organized. What you eat, right? How you dress, your training routine, right?
Even your morals.
Even your morals, yes. Even your morals, they are dictated. I mean, that's a whole different thing, isn't it, now with, with the media and all that type of stuff, and you're representing your team, and how the, like, because there's finance involved, right? It begins to matter, right? from the perspective of, being a public figure and so on and so forth, right? So yeah, all of these things come into it, right? So that their life is highly organized, highly systemized, right? But why does that just need to be for, right, sport? And so what is interesting, that's sort of where I want to conclude, right, is that I had this really interesting conversation with somebody who was being given dawah to, right? And this guy, I was having this conversation with him, and he's basically saying, look, I believe in God, I sort of pray to God in my own way, right? I try to live a sort of good life and not do bad things. I help people out and whatever, right? I just don't believe in, organized religion, right? It's the same thing, the whole topic today. So what, I'm thinking, this has always been a challenge for me. How do you talk to someone like that who, from so many perspectives, right, has got the right idea, but they don't want to organize this life around a religion, right? So what I said to him is this, look, if you want to achieve anything, you need to organize your life, right? There's no company that's going to be successful without degrees of organization, right? Even you, in order to accomplish where you are today in terms of your qualifications, right? It's all to do with some organized form of behavior, right? It's very rare to find that someone achieves something significant in life without discipline and organization, right? And that's the key. The key is discipline. Why is it different when it comes to religion? Why would you say that when it comes to your religious life, when everything else, you understand the need, you're going to get up a certain time, like all those type of things, right? You need to go to bed on time in order to get up the next morning in order to function at work, like all of these things. Why, when it comes to religion, is it different? And why do we set the benchmark so low, right? That's the other thing. Why is the benchmark so low, right? Do you really think that that's just good enough? Do you really think that God, who created these amazing, intricate mechanisms through which and by which the universe works, they are truly astounding when you look at them? Don't you think, therefore, that in your religious life, in your relationship with God, that you also need rules and guidance and laws through which and by which you should live? Why would it therefore be different? If God has created the universe according to these intricate processes, why would it be different when it comes to your religious life, that there should not also be intricate processes? There should also not be laws of success and laws of failure, right? Things that optimize our human life, right? And then add to that the fact that at the end of it, most of us, and this is obviously the thing, I was talking to him about the afterlife. Do you think there's a life after death? And of course, like most people would like to believe that there's some paradise, right? Or something, right? But I said, why would you think that you would get to paradise just moseying along and doing whatever you feel like? Is that how it works in your company, for example? Right? Okay. Like if you want to retire comfortably, you have to invest in the pension scheme, right? That's just simple, right? Similarly, if you want to find something waiting for you in the afterlife, don't you need to make a concerted effort to invest in what is going to get you there? And I said, look, at the end of the day, Hitler was nice to his dog, right? Hitler was nice to Eva Braun. I'm sure Hitler was nice to the people around him, right?
Yeah.
Just saying, I'm a nice guy, I get on with the people around me. Yeah, well, I'm sure Hitler was like that, with his Alsatian and Eva Braun, right? So it's not really remarkable, is it?
No.
Right? That's not really remarkable, right? So I think these are the points, is that, in order to achieve something, and I don't even say remarkable, but in order to achieve something of any real significance, you need to have some sort of organization and systemization behind it. This is what life tells us, right? It's not any different when it comes to your relationship with God and building that relationship with your creator. God doesn't deserve less. Actually, God deserves more. And the final point is, that's what's going to be good for you. That's where you're going to really find ultimate, true happiness as well. Because happiness doesn't come from just sitting around and moseying around and, just doing what you like when you feel like it, right? As we've studied and we've looked at it into previously in, the talk about flow, we understand that flow comes from pushing yourself to the limits of your capabilities. And I guess hopefully that answers the question, right? Do we need religion? Do we need organized religion? Yes, definitely we do.
Yeah. It's interesting that you link it to if you want success in this life, in terms of anything, your company or whatever, there's rules, there's regulations. When it comes to spirituality, which we all agree is there. I mean, even the most hardcore, really hardcore atheists who say, yeah, I still believe in spirituality. And I want to link this, get your thoughts on the perspective, on the idea of decision paralysis, right? So there's been studies to show that when human beings are given, say, 24 jars and they jam jars, and they hate it, when they're given 6 and they just choose between one of the 6, they're much, much happier. So when you have an imposing religion, which is externally applied to you, right? It's actually good for you because you don't really have to make that choice yourself. It's kind of like, okay, I'm a Muslim, so I know I can't just pray at the end of 10 years, all the 10 years prayers in one go. I have to pray in between these time periods.
Yeah. I mean, this is the beautiful look. One of the things that many people who have, converted, reverted, or whatever the term that people want to use to Islam, one of the things that they find about once they've become Muslim, one of the very positive things is that you're not confused anymore, right? About what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
You're not confused anymore about what you need to do with your life, right? Obviously, you still have choices. It's not that the choices go away, right? It's not that the struggle has completely evaporated, but you're not struggling over futile things that have literally, honestly, no answer, right?
Yeah.
Literally, like you talk about decision paralysis. I think like one of the things that, a moral person can be constantly paralyzed by is, what is the right way to behave?
Yeah.
Right? What do I do? Like if I do this, I'm going to offend that person. If I do this, I'm going to offend this person, right? I myself don't feel that any of these things are really the right things to do, but I do know that making other people, not offending others and making them happy, right? And, trying to make the world more peaceful. There are a lot of people like that. They genuinely want good. They want good for others, right? But often wanting good for others contradicts their deep instincts about how they think things should be, right? It's a conflict, right? And so people are in this perpetual state of confusion. So this is why you can have programs like Moral Maze and, stuff like that, where people are arguing endlessly about the pros and cons of this and that. And, people should have choice. And but if they have the choice, then there's this possible consequence and that. And of course, these things never go away completely, even in organized religion. But the reality is that at least with organized religion, you have very, very clear boundaries. As the Prophet Muhammad said, what is lawful is clear, and what is unlawful is clear. The halal is clear, the haram is clear, right? In between that, there are some things, right, that people don't know, except like those who are well versed in knowledge. But the vast majority of stuff, right, it's really clear. It's not confusing, right? And that's the beautiful thing. It frees up so much of your life to be able to get on with much more important stuff, right? Like developing your character and then knowing what it really means to help people, because you have a grid, you have a guideline, you have a matrix of what helping people really means. Like, how about that? What is even helping people?
Yeah.
Do you understand? Like, so I think that's the other beautiful thing about organized religion. Exactly as you said, it cuts down in this choice paralysis. The problem with choice paralysis is ultimately, of course, that the term paralysis, you end up doing nothing
And feeling bad.
and feeling even worse because you're not doing anything, because you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah.
You know, so when atheists talk about, oh, you know, I want to be, you know, I want to be able to, you know, whatever nonsense, it really is some of the stuff they come out with is such nonsense, right? About, you know, I should, you know, the freedom to make our own decisions. We're liberated to, yeah, right, whatever, right?
Yeah.
You know,
It's kind of interesting. You know, there's been some discussion amongst academics about the need for there to be a religious revival within the Western world. And these are atheists, by the way.
bro, I'm
But,
just gonna just keep going. I'm gonna get back to you in a minute. Yeah.
yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. The need for a religious revival within the Western world, as long as somebody else does the religiousness, right? So they don't want to be religious themselves. They rather somebody else actually be religious. And that just goes to show you that ultimately society has to be governed by some link to something transcendent. Something transcendent always has to anchor society. So Sheikh, while you were gone, I was
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I heard.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to link this to contemporary China. I've been looking a lot into the history of the Communist Party and
Yeah.
how they posit themselves. What's very interesting is there is a lot of religious concepts that they're actually teaching, but they're just not calling it religion. So, for example, in 2021, it's going to be on the 1st of July, 100-year anniversary for the
Yeah.
Communist Party, right?
Yeah.
1921 to 2021. And they actually been preparing this for the last 10 years.
Mm.
So, why is it so important? Like, it's just 100 years. I mean, they're planning on going on for a lot longer. Why do they have these rituals? And they have certain things about,
Yeah.
you know, in Islam, we have the idea of a ghida for the deen, right? And we
Yeah.
have the idea of, you know, maqam, that you don't disrespect the symbols of Islam. So, for example, some Muslim academics and scholars would even say, even the moon and the crescent, although it's not from Islam directly, but it's linked to Islam. So even disrespecting that could be problematic because what it's linked to. So likewise, they have these religious type of behaviors around the Chinese flag, around Xi Jinping, around Mao Zedong, and likewise the Soviet
Well, look
Union.
in France, bro. The same
Yeah,
thing, France. The
the French
same
flag.
thing in France. So we're talking about France. We don't need to go to China. We just need to go across the channel.
Yeah.
As this Macron, yeah, Macaroni, Mr. Macaroni, yeah, okay, whatever his name is, yeah,
Macron.
yeah, whatever, man. It's not even worth saying his name, right? Okay, this waste man, yeah. As he's talking about, you know, freedom of speech and, you know, what the laissez-faire and all these type of things they go on, right, about, right? But in their laws, you're not allowed to desecrate the French flag.
Yep.
What happened to freedom of speech and expression? You can draw a cartoon mocking the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, right? But there was an artist, yeah, who had done this image of someone wiping their backside, right, with the French flag, right? And they passed laws to ban it.
Yeah.
Right. And when Macron, right, had someone write in an academic wrote an article against him in the Financial Times, right? What did he do? Did he say, oh, you can say whatever you like, no problem? No, he complained and had it removed.
Yeah.
Like, what? Seriously? Like, and people don't get this. People don't see this. People don't understand this. Like, this contradiction. So, like, they literally, it's become so blatant that literally within a day they contradict them. It doesn't, you know, Allah doesn't even let them wait a week to show them, right? Because Allah knows that people's attention, this is the TikTok generation, right? They've got an attention span of a span of 10 seconds, right? You're right. The same in China, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Chinese are very, you know, that's why they're brutalizing the Uyghurs, right? And, you know, for obviously, I'm going to say from and the same thing that Ferdinand and Isabella understood, right, in the Reconquista. That's why they wiped out the Muslims. They were either the Muslims and the Jews either had to convert, and some pretend conversion was not enough. That's why they had the Inquisition. They had to be like fervent Catholics, and it basically just wiped them out because they understood that they couldn't, because they'd seen from the Muslims, right, that multicultural Islamic society that wasn't Islamic, but that they looked at it as a sign of weakness, right? And that's part of the reason why it split and divided and couldn't stand, right? They realized the importance of a unified ideology, and the Chinese have understood the same thing, right? It's that simple, right? We can't have these people living a whole different cultural existence with their own ideas, right? Those ideas have to be subservient to, well, that's it, because that's their religion. That's their religion. That's it. That's their religion. That's their God. As it was the same with Pharaoh. Similarly, the same thing, right?
I think it's Sigmund Freud who spoke about every worldview has to have unquestionable fundamentals, which it doesn't allow any other worldview to question. So even like you rightly pointed out, liberalism and this idea of everything is equal and everyone is entitled to an opinion, but then there's certain red lines which they're like, no, not these. You're not allowed to challenge these, right? Because if you have liquid, it has to be in a container. You can't just have liquid just without anything. So every worldview has to have these unquestionable. I think he used the word fascist or something like this. You have to have something just completely unquestionable in order for any worldview to be preserved. Which is quite interesting.
I mean, look, from the point of view of structuring society, right? I understand, right? I can understand where the Chinese are coming from. I can understand where the French are coming from. Yeah. It's not that I don't understand, laissez-faire and Macron and, what these guys are going on about, right? The point is the contradiction. The point is the hypocrisy, right? The point is the fact that they can't see that this is the real issue, right? At least in Islam, we are very clear. These are our rules. These are our guidelines. These are our borderlines. You are free to do this. You are not free to do that. That's the thing, right? And I think this is the thing that as the Muslims, right, is that it's the hypocrisy. It's you claim one thing, right, and then you do something else, right? And then people say, oh, well, in your Muslim countries, you're not free to do this. But we never said that you were free to do that. We never claimed that we had that freedom.
That's your
We submit to Allah. That's our religion. Why don't you just say that, right? That we don't believe in freedom either, right? No, we don't believe in freedom. We believe in this. And in order to live in our country, you need to do this and this and this. And, everything has to be subservient. This is not what you said, right? You may be singing that tune now, but you didn't. That's not what you were saying 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Because at the end of the day, you realize that when you say those things, you reduce yourself to the same level as everybody else that you're criticizing. And then the question comes in, okay, fine. That's not a problem. We can understand that from the point of view of running a society, you need that attitude. But what makes your system better? Oh, what? Some Rousseau, right, who couldn't even live his life according to his own principles. What? He's your guy, right? Who's the guy who's, where's, oh, you mean it's just some man-made up thing that you just make it up as you go along? That's what your way of life. You see, that's the problem, right? Because the moment they admit that, they start having to admit the fact that there's no basis for anything else. There's no, and that goes back to the point you said, bro. There's no transcendental, and that's what they're always trying to do. They're trying to connect it to something transcendental when they talk about fundamental human rights, which they don't believe in. But it's still, because they contradict themselves all the time. If they're fundamental, it's like Muslims saying, we believe in Tawheed, only God should be worshipped, right? But you know what? Right now, in this particular situation, let's get out the idols, guys, right? Line them up. let's pray to them, right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, no, wait a minute, like, come on.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, like, so these funds, but they still, because they say they're fundamental, right? Even the American Constitution has tried to root itself in something transcendental, because it says,
We believe
you
these
know,
rights
we
to be
consider these things
inalienable,
self-evident, right?
self-evident. Yep.
Yes, self-evident,
God-given.
a priori, right? Exactly, right? It's still trying to root it in something transcendental, right?
Yeah.
That's the attempt. But then obviously that's going to fall against the roadblock of reason and logic. And that's the irony, you know, as great as much as the French Revolution, right, has tried to paint itself as, you know, this force of reason and logic. When it actually comes up against it, it's found itself wanting.
Yep.
And that's going to be the same in China. It's going to be the same. Like I said, that's literally what the history of the world is about. Allah throwing the truth against the falsehood.
Yeah. I think,
and so that goes back to Rabia, you know, when he was standing in front of Rostrum, and Rostrum says to him, right, why are you fighting us? You know, this Persian general, this great Persian general Rostrum. And then there's Rabia, who this just, you know, why are you fighting? And he's just an ordinary soldier, right? He gives this amazing speech. He says, why are you fighting us? You know, do you want women? You want camels? You want money? We'll give it to you. Go back to the desert. He said, we have come to take the people away from the worship of men to the worship of the one God. We've come to take people away from the injustice of man-made ways of life, man-made religion, to the justice of Islam. We have come to take people away from the narrowness of this life and the next to the vast expanse, to the narrowness of this life, to the vast expanse of this life and the next. And when he gives this like short speech that's 3 sentences, Rostrum says, are you the leader of these people? He thinks he's the Khilaf, he thinks he's the Emir al-Mu'mineen, right? He says, no. Are you a general? No. Oh, well, what are you? I'm just an ordinary soldier.
Allahu Akbar.
Right?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
So that's about all the time we have for this week. I'm actually thinking this segues into maybe doing a live stream next week, inshallah, on what makes a civilization, because I remember many years ago, I don't remember what the talk was, but there was a talk you gave in which you spoke about how do we judge a civilization, either by its buildings or by how it treats its lowest denominator. And I think that's very much linked to, you know, what is the future of the Western civilization? What is the future of religion within the West?
I mean, that's very interesting. I could get lost on that, but I actually think it's one of the reasons why, and there's a prophetic, you know, there's a prophetic foundation for this. Why a room? If you look at the West, you know, if you can analogize that a Rome is the West. It's like the continuation of that legacy. Is they have some qualities, right? And interestingly enough, those qualities which the Prophet Muhammad mentioned, right, is there will not come a time until a room the most amongst you, which is pretty much what it is now, maybe except for the Chinese, but you know,
that could also be their system in a way.
It is that, because that's what the Prophet said, because they, and the reason is he mentioned the system. He said because they look after the orphans and the widows, right?
Yeah.
And what did he mention? They look at and they recover from a defeat quickly. They recover from a setback very quickly.
Yeah, sorry,
and they don't allow their rulers to be tyrants over them. And the Prophet said, and this is an excellent quality. This is a really good quality that they have, right? He emphasized they don't let their rulers, like they don't let their, you know, rulers mess around with them for too long. Yeah, obviously they'll do their whatever, but they don't allow it to happen too long, right?
Yeah.
So those qualities.
Just to correct you slightly on that, because this confused me as well. I will bring it up in the next live stream to
is
avoid.
It not a hadith? Is it not?
Yeah, this is actually not the sayings of the Prophet. This is actually the sayings of Amr ibn As, right? So what he's saying is, this is what the Prophet said, that the Romans are going to be the most numerous, And
Right.
then he gave his explanation, which is they recover from war, the way they
Right.
treat people, and their
Okay. I have to check that because I've gone back to that so many times. So yeah. I thought it was a
maybe I
statement of
read a
Prophet.
different one, but I think that's a good one to start with next week. Definitely.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not all negative. And I think, having said all these bad things about France, France has lots of, it's a really beautiful country and it's got some really good things. The French are not all bad. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, even I mean, if we look at what's the name of that Doctors Without Borders? I think they're French as well.
Yeah.
All this amazing stuff, all of this.
Médecins Sans Frontières.
Yeah. You get a lot of great people. So yeah, let's wrap up there. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, thanks, bro.
Everybody for watching, and we will be live again next week, inshallah.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.